This whole area that I'm in just now is called Cowgate, and as you can see, there is a cow going into that building there. It says Cowgate on that sign, and the cow is coming out of the building there. Look at that, that is mad. Nowadays, this is a modern part of the city of Edinburgh, the capital of Scotland. But once upon a time, a few centuries ago, this was one of the worst slum areas in all of Europe. In the 19th century, the Irish immigrant community came all the way here from their homeland in search of a better life. Whilst they were trying to escape famines of their own in their own country, this area of Edinburgh, the capital of Scotland, became known as Little Ireland. The Irish communities of the 19th century here in Edinburgh were looked down upon by the original Scots who were here. There was huge division between the native Scots and the new Irish people, and yeah, there was huge prejudice against them. To help bring the Scots and the Irish together, two men had an idea. Father Edward Hannon and Michael Wheelahan started a football team. The new team wore the green of Ireland. The club's crest was an Irish harp. The club's motto was Erin Go Brach, Ireland forever. Michael Wheelahan, one of the founders of the club, when thinking of the name, remembered that the old Latin word for Ireland was Hibernia. And so on the 6th of August of 1875, Hibernian Football Club was born. And yeah, in this video I'm going to take you from this area where obviously Hibs were founded, and I'm going to try and cram in the entire history of Hibs into this one video. So yeah, as ever, if I do miss anything, please do let me know in the comments below. I think I've done a pretty good job in the research I've done, but as is the case of anything, trying to get the whole history of a football club into one vlog is always hard. But yes, please do remember to hit that like button and subscribe if you're new. There's way more content coming that you don't want to miss out on. If you want to keep up to date with anything Hibs are doing, then please do download OneFootball. It's completely free, and it is the first link in the description box below. I couldn't have made it any easier for you, and by downloading it via that link, that will take you through to the App Store. If you click on it, they will know, the people at OneFootball will know it's come from my video, and they'll be buzzing. They might want to sponsor me again, and I can make more videos that you'll enjoy, like this one that you're watching right now. But all that stuff aside, you should just get it because it's a quality football app. Honestly, it's class. Keeps you up to date with anything, and you can star Hibs if you're a Hibs fan and get push notifications on anything from goals, match facts, alerts, transfers, and loads more just around your club. Any news that happens with Hibs, you won't be kept out of loop on, and you will be one of the first to know. Not just that though, there's loads of football news from all around the world, loads of scores, loads of updates. Anything you want about football is on that app, and you can build the app around teams that you love, from Hibs to Barcelona to, I don't know, anyone else, Liverpool, yeah, any team. Take a look on there and let me know you've downloaded it in the comments. I'd really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Despite there being some early resistance to there being a Catholic club on Scottish shores, Hibs slowly but surely established themselves as a top football club here in the country. Hibs were the first team from the east of Scotland to have won a major trophy. That was the 1887 Scottish Cup. Hibs also played in a competition called the Championship of the World, where the Scottish Cup winners would play the FA Cup winners back in the 1800s. They sadly lost to Aston Villa. Hibs played on a number of grounds around the city until they finally found a place to call home, and that place is Easter Road. They got a lease on this site in the late 1890s, and they've been here ever since. And what a lovely looking ground it is. I absolutely love the way this ground looks. Right, so a little bit of background on Easter Road itself before we delve into the history of Hibs. The stadium itself was the first ever ground in Britain to have held a European Cup match. Hibs played in the first season of the European Cup in the 1955/56 season. So yeah, Hibs' Easter Road became the first British ground to host a European Cup match. In other Easter Road related news, a record crowd for a Hibs game was recorded here in 1950 when they played Hearts in the Edinburgh Derby, and 65,000 people turned up. Easter Road was also the first ground in Scotland to use undersoil heating. That was put in 1980. Plans were made to move away from Easter Road in the 1990s and potentially ground share with Hearts, but Hibs eventually did the right thing and just redeveloped their current ground. And it's now the beautiful modern stadium that we see today. I absolutely love it, honestly. And so the next part of the story comes here from the famous 5 stand. Hibs enjoyed their golden age shortly after World War II. Their forward line were dubbed the famous 5 and were considered the finest front line of any in Scottish football at the time. The famous 5 comprised of Gordon Smith, Bobby Johnston, Laurie Riley, Eddie Turnbull and Willie Ormond. And each of them scored over 100 goals for Hibs. 4 of the 5 were signed from junior or youth leagues, while Willie Ormond was the only man who cost them anything, just £1,200 from my friends over at Stenhouse Muir in 1946. In the post-war period, where a lot of these guys were playing for the club, Hibs won 3 league titles, 4 in total then. One was from 1903, back in their early days, and Hibs were really considered one of the best sides in Britain at this time, just after the war. As I mentioned earlier, this ground was the first to be used for the European Cup, where Hibs were actually invited to play in. It wasn't based on a league position back then, and yeah, because Hibs actually finished 5th the season before. And they're the famous 5 during the time that Hibs got into the European Cup. And yeah, there were 2 considerations that UEFA took into account when inviting teams into the European Cup at the time, and they were, would you draw a big crowd? Would you garner a lot of interest from teams around Europe? They thought Hibs would. And did you have floodlights? Because you had to play nighttime games. So that first ever European Cup competition wasn't based on being the champions of your league at all. It was actually being, yeah, based on other conditions, like do you have floodlights and will you draw attention from places around Europe? How mad is that? So yeah, UEFA decided Hibs would do. Chelsea were invited into it. They were the current holders of the, not Premier League, obviously the first division in England at the time, and they had floodlights and stuff, so they were invited in. But whoever was in charge of the football authorities in England at the time persuaded them not to join. I'm not too sure why, but yes, Chelsea were persuaded not to join. There was no English team in that first year of the European Cup, and so Hibs were the first British team to compete in the European Cup. They beat a German team called Rot-Weiss Essen in the first round. They then beat Djurgården of Sweden in the quarter-finals. They then lost to Stad Rem in the semi-final, so Hibs got to the semis of the first ever European Cup. There you go. I bet a lot of you didn't know that. And yeah, obviously Stad Rem would go on to lose against Real Madrid, who went on to obviously win the first 5 European Cups that there ever were. So had Hibs have even got to the final, I'm not sure they'd have won. Obviously Real Madrid had the likes of Di Stefano at the time and stuff, so yes, I'm not sure if they'd have ever, you know, won it, but they got to the semi-finals. During the 1960s, Hibs competed in the Intercity Fairs Cup a lot and even beat teams like Barcelona and Napoli. Domestically though, in the 60s, the club didn't really live up to the heights that they had set during that post-war era. That was until 1/5 of the famous 5 rejoined Hibs, not as a player, but as a manager. A true one-club man in his playing days, Eddie Turnbull left Aberdeen where he was managing and came back to manage Hibs. The team were popularly known as Turnbull's Tornadoes. They finished 2nd in 1974 and 1975 and even won the League Cup in 1972. They also won the Drybrook Cup twice during his reign as well. That's a competition that's no longer around, but it used to be played between the 4 highest scorers of the top division and the 4 highest scorers of the second division as well. So I think 8 teams were in it, and it was all just the top scoring teams of Scotland in the time. Some of the old trophies that they had back in the day are absolutely mad. It does make me laugh. But as the 70s turned into the 80s, Hibs fell behind teams like Aberdeen and Dundee United, who were starting to be called the new firm, of course, because they were so good during the 80s, and like Fergie was coming in and Jim McLean over at Dundee United. These two teams really did well and competed against also the Old Firm teams who are also obviously massive, and Hibs kind of fell behind a little bit. Turnbull resigned and Hibs got relegated for just the second time in their history in 1980. They did get straight back into the Prem at the first time of asking though. Hibs faced liquidation in 1990 as the 80s saw horrendous mismanagement of the finances and of like stuff in the boardroom. Hearts proposed that the two clubs merged. I couldn't see this myself. Two huge clubs in a city like Edinburgh merging together. That's just a big no-no for me. And yes, you can share a stadium, you know, Inter and AC do it, as well as other teams around Europe, but to actually merge the two teams, no. Fans love their football and that's their identity. Imagine like merging the two together, it just wouldn't feel right. Hibs fans formed a hands-off Hibs group to make sure that the notion didn't go through, that the club was gobbled up by Hearts. And eventually the idea of merging the two was scrapped in the early 1990s. And in the early to mid 1990s, Hibs even won a League Cup and were, yeah, doing quite well in the Prem and had some quite high up finishes as well. Alex McLeish then came in, but Hibs actually got relegated, but again, they got promoted at the first time of asking. In more modern times, Hibs do reach the odd final here and there in the League Cup and the Scottish Cup. They even won the League Cup in 2007 and the Scottish Cup in 2016. Who remembers that infamous final at Hampden against Rangers? They qualified for the 2013-14 Europa League and they faced Malmo, and they hold an unwanted record here in Scotland. They have the worst ever European defeat on aggregate by any Scottish team, having lost 9-0 across the two legs to the Swedish club. After a winless run that season that they lost 9-0 against Malmo in the Europa League, they had a poor run and they finished up in the relegation playoff spot where they played Hamilton. They lost on penalties and once again got relegated down to the second division, the Championship. And it was that season that they were in the Championship that they played Rangers in the final. I think, weren't they both in the Championship at the time? I think they were. And yeah, it was, like I said earlier, an infamous final where obviously there was that like storming of the pitch after the game. Absolute madness. And that was their first Scottish Cup win in 2016 since 1902. So that shows how long they've been around and how long they were successful for it. That 1902 they won a Scottish Cup and they didn't win their next one until 2016. It was Neil Lennon though who later led them back to the Premiership, having got them promoted from the Championship again. One of their biggest name players to come through here in recent years though is Scott Brown, and he also holds the record to have had the highest transfer fee received for him whilst being a Hibs player. So 4.4 mil was paid by Celtic to Hibs. He's obviously now Celtic captain, big name up here in Scotland, Scott Brown, and that is the most that Hibs have ever received from a player, 4.4 mil. So yeah, Hibs are obviously one of the biggest clubs in Scotland. They've won the Cup numerous times, they've won League Cups, they've won other cups, and they've also won the top division 4 times. And they were the precursors, I guess you could say. They were the original inspiration for Brother Walfred to start a Catholic-based football team in Glasgow, and so Celtic were born out of the idea of Hibs here in Edinburgh first. And yes, from that original place that we're in, Cowgate earlier on, which was one of Europe's worst slum areas, to now having a football club here with such a stadium. Look at that, what a story Hibs have. And I hope you've enjoyed this video and learnt a little bit about Hibs from, yeah, their early days as obviously poor Irish immigrants looking for something to do and to bring them together with the rest of the people that were currently here, to them playing the first ever European Cup season ever. Like, that's absolutely mad. Easter Road, the first ever British stadium to have a European Cup match at it. I absolutely love stories like that so much. I'm glad they didn't merge with Hearts though, but had they have done, do you think, let me know in the comments below, do you think that an Edinburgh club the size of Hibs and Hearts merging together, so it would obviously have made them a much bigger club if they would have merged together, would that team be able to compete today with the Old Firm? Would they be able to compete in Europe? Would they be competitive in Europe? Or, I don't know, would they not be as big because they don't have the rivalry against each other? I'm not sure, but it's an interesting question. Please do remember to hit that like button and subscribe if you aren't already. There's so much more coming, and please do download OneFootball as well. I'll also leave some videos around my head so you can keep watching my content. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.